All right, we're ready to go. So good afternoon and welcome to the Audit Committee meeting for April 2nd, 2024. We're meeting in person with one committee member remote, and they meet the requirement of posting the agenda at the remote location. Votes today will be taken by roll call vote. Nicole, can you please call the roll?
Chair Ray.
Present.
Directors Hurst.
Present.
McMillan.
Yes.
Smith. Vespi. Chair Ray, you have a quorum of the committee.
Thank you, Nicole. I don't believe there are any additions to the agenda, so we'll move on to public comment. Do we have any comments from the public?
If there are public speakers in the Zoom waiting room, please raise your hand through the Zoom app or press *9 if you are listening by phone. I see none.
Thank you. I have no chair's report for today's committee meeting, and I assume that the members of the committee have had a chance to read through the minutes from the last meeting. So unless you have any concerns, I can entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
I'll
I
second.
don't know if you could hear that. Hurst, so moved.
I did, Director Hurst. I believe that
Okay.
Director McMillan, are you still reading the minutes, or?
No.
You're okay? Okay.
I wasn't here, so I'll
Okay.
say it.
I second. Okay. So, Nicole, can you go ahead and take the vote?
Chair Ray.
Yes.
Director Hurst.
Aye.
McMillan.
I would abstain unless I need to vote.
We need you to vote.
I can, okay, yes.
Smith and Vespi are absent. Chair Ray, approval of the minutes passed.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole.
Unlikely.
There are no items on the consent calendar today, so we'll go ahead and move on to action discussion. And we have 4 items under that section of the agenda. And Chris will go ahead and kick things off with a discussion on the Audit Committee responsibilities.
Thank you, Chair Ray, and good afternoon, everyone. In your packet is a presentation that starts off with the presentation to the Audit Committee. It looks like this. And there's and if you would go to just slide 3, I guess that's where we start off the presentation. And this speaks to the Audit Committee's responsibilities. Well, I'd like to start off by saying we're fortunate to have directors that are repeating members on the committee, and that really bodes well for the committee. But we do like to communicate what the Audit Committee's responsibilities are each year nonetheless. And so for the Audit Committee's responsibilities, again, the Audit Committee is a standing advisory committee responsible for the following matters, which are 5. The first one is recommending selection of the independent auditor or auditing firm, and that was done last year. We went through the full RFP process, and this committee selected the next auditor, which is Davis Farr. Number 2, oversight of the audit contract and annual audit. The 3rd, oversight of any supplemental audits or agreed upon procedures. The 4th, review of the annual audit itself, including the ACFR. And then 5th, preparation of an annual report to the board summarizing its activities, actions, and recommendations, which is completed at the end of the year. And that represents the responsibilities of the committee. And Chair Ray, that concludes my comments.
Are there any comments or questions from the directors? No? Okay. We'll go ahead and move on to items 2 and 3. And Shannon Ayala from Davis Farr will provide, I'm sorry, is that how you say that, Shannon?
Yep.
Okay.
That's it.
Shannon's from Davis Farr, and she'll go ahead and provide an overview of the required auditor communications and the audit process.
Great. Thank you, Chair Ray. As she mentioned, I'm here to talk about the planning for the 23-24 audit. I'm not sure what happened to if you want to go to the first slide, please. So we'll speak about the scope and timing of the audit, the audit engagement letter, identification of audit risk and development of the audit plan, and the communication with those in governance, which is this committee. Next slide, please. So the scope and timing, we have no changes to the scope of the work from the prior year. The purpose of Audit is to express an opinion that the financial statements are free of material misstatement, and we do define materiality as 2% of revenues. As Chris mentioned, this is the first year of the new audit contract, and the timing of the audit will take place the interim field work will take place in April, and the final field work will be towards the end of August. Next slide, please. So the auditor's responsibilities are to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement, and we do that in a variety of ways based on knowledge of the entity, things that are going on in the environment and at the organization. Obtain an understanding of internal control. So this will involve updating internal control narratives that we have from prior years, which includes speaking to key employees over significant accounting areas, including cash disbursements, payroll, purchasing. Additionally, our team will be performing a complete information technology risk assessment. So one of our certified information systems auditors will be in touch with the IT department of the Water Authority. We'll speak to them, perform an assessment over various types of information technology, like logical security, data security, financial systems, etc. And they will use that to assess the risks as it relates to the audit and the financial information. And as part of that process, best practice recommendations usually do come out of that process, so we'll look forward to hearing those. We also evaluate the accounting policies and estimates used in preparation of the ACFR, and then we perform tests of compliance with laws and regulations, including investments, grants, etc. Next slide, please. Management's responsibility is for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements, responsible for designing and implementing the internal controls, to inform us of any known or suspected fraud, and for the accuracy and completeness of all information provided. And then our identification of audit risk, like I mentioned, is based on the knowledge of the entity, inquiries with staff during our planning and interim field work, external factors, so things affecting the water industry, laws, regulations. We also review government risk alerts, and then we do, as I mentioned, do fraud inquiries of staff and those in governance. So our fraud inquiry of those in governance is this meeting today. So if anyone does have anything that they're concerned about, or any questions, or would like to share any information, now is the time. If you don't think of anything now and something comes up later, my information is included in our SAS 114 communication to those in governance letter. So my phone number and email address is in there, and I can be contacted by both of those methods. Next slide, please. So this year, the risk areas that we have identified are any ongoing litigation with the Water Authority. We will contact attorneys, review confirmation letters, minutes of the board meetings, and inquire with staff about litigation. Capital assets and construction in progress, since it is such a significant part of the Water Authority's assets, we will do some additional testing in those areas. And then each year we're required to perform a test of unpredictability. Last year I selected this test before the meeting, but this year I'm holding off till this meeting is over, and also until our planning meeting with the management, in order to determine what our test will be, because I wanted to design that based on any feedback from this committee and management before determining what we will do.
I have a question about the capital assets.
Uh-huh.
Do you just randomly pick projects?
So we typically, depending on where everything is. On capital assets, we usually test material additions. And then for construction in progress, we kind of judgmentally select those. I do different things. Sometimes it's based on the materiality of the organization for the audit. Sometimes it's if something hasn't had activity for a couple of years. There are some things that sort of raise red flags in our toolkit that we use to make selections to ask about those projects. So just ensuring that the team is reviewing them regularly and really asking themselves, are those projects going to result in a capital asset to the water authority, to ensure that they're correctly classified. And then with that, I can answer any questions or have any discussion with the committee.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
So earlier this morning, I received a request from one of the committee members to possibly look at the reviewing our cost recovery policy relating to unused capacity, whether it's caused by demand roll-off or potential emergency use. And I didn't know if there was, first of all, my initial research did not produce or did not, I can't even think of the word. I couldn't find that we had a policy. My initial research, I couldn't find that we had a policy in regards to that. And I didn't know if the committee member had a concern that we weren't following the policy, because first of all, reviewing policies I don't believe is this committee's responsibility. Where audit is strictly looking at financials, unless it's to ensure that we are adhering to any financial aspect of that policy. And so unless Tish or David know differently of whether or not we have a policy, I think that we should refer this to the chair or maybe the finance committee, finance and administration committee.
That's a great question. What do you recommend this for?
So we don't have a cost recovery plan. So Director Hurst, was this inquiry from you?
Yes, I believe it was.
So maybe you can add some more light to give us some direction on how we should proceed.
Yeah, from what I understand, when LAFCO does their MSR on the water authority, one of the focal points will be whether we are in fact recovering our costs in a fair manner. In other words, they're going to review our rate structure, if you would. And I don't believe that we do have a policy on that, but I would be interested in an auditor's reviewing the way we recover our costs, whether they think that our rate structure does in fact fairly reflect the way that we spend our money, and that would give us a little insight perhaps into what to expect from the LAFCO MSR.
Director Hurst, actually cost recovery and whether or not we're charging rates properly is managed through the cost of service process. And every year for the last 10 years, we've had a cost of service study that reviews to ensure that we're properly recovering the costs. And then the last 2 years, we had a third-party cost of service consultant review the primary's cost of service report. So we've done fully evaluated and vetted whether we're properly recovering the cost based on the cost of service that we have engaged for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I understand those processes. I guess it would be fair to say that I'm not completely satisfied with that, and I don't think LAFCO will be. So I would be interested in another review. I understand that it's not up to me entirely.
I guess my concern is that the auditor cannot confirm or cross-check or validate a cost of cost of service consultants work? I mean, at best, we could hire or engage, again, another third-party cost of service consultant, because that's the line of work that would be required to validate or invalidate that work, which would require an RFP, and then we'd have to engage a cost of service consultant. So that's how we would have to proceed.
Yeah, and I'm not interested in that. I would be interested in an auditor's opinion. So I understand that you believe that's outside of the scope of their work, and I accept that.
It's just that an auditor can't validate. They don't have the skill set, or it's not that it's out of their scope. It's just not what they do. You want to speak to that?
So, Director McMillan, I'm sorry, Director McMillan has a comment, and we'll have Shannon speak to that. But Director Hurst, I just wanted to let you know that I've been in the government finance business since I was 23 years old, and we'll just say that's a good number of years, and without giving away my age. And really what an auditor's responsibility to do is to review the financial processes of an agency, ensure that they are properly capitalizing items according to their policies and according to GASB, and also
Generally
thank you,
accepted
thank
accounting
you, thank you.
principles.
Government GAP and GASB, and so that's really what their scope of an auditor does, and since we don't have a policy. Maybe that's a discussion that we can bring to the proper person, whether it's the chair or whether it is the Finance Administrative Services Committee chair, that we can share your concerns and kind of move forward from there and address.
But our cost of service does, the way we set rates, we do follow the M1.
Right. But I think his concern isn't necessarily the cost of service study. I think his concern is the fact that we have issues with people rolling off and unused capacity that we're not collecting revenue on. And am I understanding that correctly? And that what a policy would be to address that loss of revenue? Am I understanding that concern properly?
Yeah, not just from roll off, but we have a lot of underutilized capacity, and I'd like a review somehow of the way we recover the costs of that under or unutilized capacity.
Okay.
Yes, so that does sound like another whole work project, and a consultant to help review. And I would recommend that we do take that up at A&F.
Yeah. So, Director McMillan, we'll go ahead and hear your comments before we close up this discussion. Sorry.
Okay, no, Director Hurst and I talked about this. He goes on the fire charge too, right? Capacity of fire?
Yeah, for Ramona in particular, and I think it's less of an issue for the Water Authority.
Correct.
But yeah, a lot of our capacity is dictated by fire code.
Got it.
And so we get it. We've had these discussions before between he and I, and the fire capacity and stuff. I'm not sure it's at the wholesale district matters much. It may at a retail, but in general not. But it is a thing of interest, and I would suggest that you look at it. I mean, if LAFCO is going to look at it and wonder if you're correct, you probably want to have some knowledge. So I would
Yeah,
state that.
I think the key is that it is a scope of work. It would require a certain dollar amount allocated, and it would have to be determined by the full board. Is that a priority?
We agree.
Yeah, so that's what have to be assessed and vetted.
No, but I'm just saying, I think Director Hurst's concern is if it's incorrect and LAFCO is going to give you a black mark, don't you want to know that ahead, or at least have some data to support your position? And your support has been, for the last 2 years, we've done a cost of service.
Last 10.
Last year, and
10.
everything's wonderful. So
That's right.
yeah, okay.
But again, we have to be mindful that we're in a budgetary constraint period of time. And so that's why it's even incumbent upon the full board to opine whether or not this rises to the occasion
Right.
of an expenditure above and beyond what we've already done to date.
Correct. Absolutely agree.
So just to finish out, I think I'm hearing two concerns here. Neither one of, well, I shouldn't say neither one. The one is Director Hurst's initial concern that he brought to me about the policy in regards to the loss of revenue through unused capacity, and that is something that I think that belongs to the A&F committee. And Tish, can you follow up with them, or who should I direct to further this along?
The chair of A&F is Gary Arant, and so a referral to him, and then he can direct staff on how and when to add to any agenda. I believe committee agendas do require approval by the chair Katz, though, correct?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking out loud, given that we are going to be re-engaging the member agency work group that is looking at the full rate redesign, it probably makes sense for that group to take on that review.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does probably benefit from board direction
Exactly.
before doing that.
Exactly. So,
Right, that's what I was going to
should
say.
Chair Ray, you reach out to Gary Arant?
And I will reach out to both Director Arant and Chair Katz. Okay? Does that sound good?
Yep.
Is that okay?
Why no?
Director Hirsch, Director McMillan? Okay. And it's not only about the cost of service study and the LAFCO looking at that, but also about Director Hirsch's concern about cost recovery and unused capacity. Okay?
And then also have a discussion about the costs associated with performing that work.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. Were there any other questions about the
Yes, questions and comments?
Yes.
First, last year I asked you about AI and what your company is doing. Have you looked at any of those, and are you running
We're
them
still
yet?
we're still using
still
our
looking, huh?
data mining software. We haven't incorporated AI yet, just due to the fact that we don't have any proprietarily created software yet, and there are some concerns about putting public information into public AI systems such as Chat GPT, because once you put it out there, it's out there for everyone. So we don't want to do anything to compromise the data of our clients.
No, our board has felt the same way, but I mean, there's internal ones too. There's
Correct.
AI that you can bring internal and then use their parameters and metrics to check your stuff.
Correct.
Internally.
And we the data mining software that we use also has AI capabilities, and we have been doing some research on that, but have not made any final decisions yet.
Yeah,
on
it
how
just
to
seems
do
like
that.
a neat thing to me from an accounting view. I mean, they're
is.
coming up with all these. I
Correct.
mean, the parameters are there, and you're always saying, well, gee, we got to throw our data in with theirs, and I'm saying, no, you can keep yours separate
Right.
and use their parameters and run it over your data
Right.
internally. Okay. AI was my first one. When you talk to the board, I would always, board members are looking for two words. That's clean report, and that scares me. I mean, you could file bankruptcy the next day. The numbers all line up like they're supposed to, but they're meaningless. So just sort of explain that by clean report, you just mean the numbers are in the right columns, basically.
When people refer to a clean report, they're referring to an unmodified opinion,
Right.
which basically means that we don't have any reason to believe there are any material misstatements in the financial
Right.
statements. So there can be items that are trivial misstatements, which are below a certain threshold, but the unmodified clean opinion means that we're not aware of any material misstatements in the financial
Correct,
statements.
but that's sort of a nice statement, but, you could still be in trouble, the company.
So
We
are you?
would hope not.
No, I'm just pointing out there, I mean,
Yeah.
the
Yes.
other thing, water, what are we doing with water that we're in storage now? Do you equate that to dollars? Or how are you valuing that? And
As the auditors,
where are you putting that?
We do not value the water and storage. The management of the water authority does
Right,
that.
right,
We
they do.
review the process and the calculations in that, and it is reported on the balance sheet of the financial
Right,
statements.
as an asset then, right?
Correct.
Okay. And I see the water authority is a little different than an asset. At Helix, it's an asset in the sense that we have a plant and we convert it to dollars pretty easy. The water authority has a problem of converting it if they have excess water. How do you make a note of that? Well, I mean, like Dan had to buy 30,000 acre feet that he can't spend. Helix, if we get runoff, which we will this year, of 6,000 or 7,000 acre feet, we value that at about $1,200 or $1,300 an acre feet, put it on our book, and then we use it next year. But the water authority is a little different in that it's maybe building up its reserves, and if you're giving it value, I mean, does it, until you can use it, if you have excess, what does it matter?
I would say that was a unique transaction, the one you're referring to, and is very favorable on to the water authority as well as to the other two partners.
No, I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about, Dan said he had to buy 30,000 acre feet this year, take or pay, that he can't sell.
So
and
we
he's
put it,
storing
so it's treated as inventory, but when rain stops, then we will sell it just like you do. It's just we won't turn around and sell it within a single season.
Oh, no, I agree with all those things,
Okay,
but if you have excess take or pay that you may never use, you're assuming you're going to get income off this 30,000 and you may never sell it.
But the
You may just dump it.
is to spend it, to use it.
Yeah, the goal is, I mean, you may want to
So
footnote in
it
your...
just sits on the balance sheet as an asset until it's sold, and then the balance sheet is adjusted.
Well, no,
It
I
doesn't go
understand,
anywhere,
but
so
it's an asset, so it's a revenue. I mean, it sort of comes in.
you don't count it as revenue until you sell it, though.
If
Yeah.
the worst were to happen and we were to spill that water, then it would be a write-off.
Right, yeah, that'd be right.
Or-
Yeah.
That's what
Or
I'm just saying.
it could
you may wanna know.
evaporate. I mean, evaporation is another form of shrinkage.
Well, yeah, but they have that typically built in. I'm just saying the water authority is much different than the retail agencies where we convert it to cash pretty easy, the water. The water authority may,
Yes.
they're trying to sell. It's just a point.
Yeah.
And then,
Well, I think it's an inaccurate point from someone who does financials and regularly does water and storage conversion to cash and handles that. Maybe I misunderstand what you're saying, but I believe the water authority does the same process that UEMA or, it's the same process.
yeah, but they may never be able to convert.
But it doesn't matter unless they spill it. It's like she says, it's treated as inventory. It sits there on the balance sheet as an asset until it's sold, and then it's reduced as an asset and switches to revenue. And then if it's spilled, then the asset is reduced and is expensed as
Right.
a loss.
Yes, and I would add that is something that we do report in the financial statements and included
Right.
in the footnotes. And our auditors actually do verify that. They send confirmations out to the agencies that hold, wherever that water is held, to verify those balances. So it is actually validated that we have it. But yes, it is turned when we receive it. If we don't use it immediately, it goes into inventory and it remains an asset until we then sell it, which could be a year later, 2 years later, whatnot. But it still sits there as an
No,
asset.
I agree. I just say that we're a little different. When you start talking take or pay and stuff like that, some of those things may change in the future. It's just a note, not a comment. And the other is, what regulations or something do you see changing this year for GASB or GAP? For us?
Oh my gosh.
Any? Are there
It's
that
the
many?
calm before the storm on GASB. We had big accounting standards implemented the past 2 years, GASB 87 and 96, the lease standard and the subscription-based IT arrangements. The it's not really big. Upcoming changes to compensated absences, so accrued vacation time, accrued sick time, things like that. That's the next accounting standard to be implemented that's going to affect the water authority, and I don't believe it will have a material effect on the financial statements. So right now there's maybe only 3 pending accounting standards, I think, before the next big one comes out for financial reporting. So it's actually a pretty quiet year on GASB implementations.
And where are we on long-term leases now? Are they considered liabilities? Does that come in, or does that come in this year?
long-term leases was GASB 87, and that was implemented a couple of years ago. So that resulted in assets and liabilities being recorded on the Water Authority's financial
And
statements.
for my colleagues' information, the finance people were arguing this in '74, I want you to know, and won. So it takes a few years before the water industry adopted it, but or '72, it was the big argument between accounting and finance.
And I would add that, yeah, the Water Authority, when we implemented that new GASB, we only had about less than a dozen leases in total. It really was a minor impact on the Water Authority's books.
Where do you put your take-or-pay contracts? Are they a liability, or where do you put them?
Well, we do, we do disclose, like, for example, the Carlsbad desalination plant. We have a full footnote disclosure on that, our obligation to take water annually. In terms of, we don't record an asset or a liability associated with it because we haven't received any of the product yet, the water as yet. So we would be disclosing it, but until we actually receive it, then it'd become an asset and a liability at that point in time.
I know, but if I have a long-term lease, I'm not going to use that year for 20 years. I still call that a liability. I'm just trying to see where you are on that. I see what you're saying. You're saying just as you take it, yet to me, if I were looking at you, I would say you have this obligation for 30 years, and anything over 5 or so, I'm going to put over as a liability. I mean, I've had directors argue in here why we should build a $5 billion pipeline because we have this liability in their minds. With those agreements that are inked, yes, there are agreements that speak to the Water Authority acquiring water into the future, yes. But until we receive it, there is no liability of the Water Authority. It's just a contractual commitment, which could be changed at any given time, let's say. I'm having a hard time with that point because in a lease, I have that liability on my books if I have leased a building out 20 years. And I haven't received the use of that building for 20 years even, and yet I still have that liability. I guess I just would like you to think about, do you have a liability there? And you're saying not until we receive the water, and I'm thinking, but you have a contract to pay it. And that's the whole thing about leases versus purchases that finance and accounting were arguing about.
Yeah, Dan, you do have a little trouble valuing that obligation. You don't know what you're going to have to pay next year or the year after that.
Well, because I have a problem valuing it doesn't mean it's not correct.
I kind of want to avoid getting down into the weeds about the processes that go on behind the scenes because this is an audit meeting. But Shannon, could you speak to the requirement of the agency in handling the take-or-pay contract, please?
I think during the audit, we can take a look at the take or pay, but your comment related to leases and having use of that building 20 years down the road, like Chris mentioned and Director Hurst, you have a lease and a right to use that asset that you're currently using, and it has terms of 20 years, and you're going to pay these specific amounts over the next 20 years. So those are solid amounts. When it's take or pay and you don't know what you're going to pay, you don't know how much you're going to take, there is really nothing to value and you can't assume a value. I can just give a little anecdote about the leases. Anything that is a variable payment didn't fall under the lease standard, so it wouldn't have shown up as an asset or a liability if the payment was not fixed. So this could be similar with the take or pay. If you don't know what you're going to be paying, you may have a commitment, but you don't have a liability until you have you take that water.
You say we have a commitment, but we don't have a liability. That confuses me from the finance side, I'll say.
Okay.
If I have a commitment, I feel I have a liability. That's all I'm saying.
But I think what I'm hearing from Shannon is that there's certain accounting standards.
Right, yeah, there's
rules.
rules.
Those are the rules that we have to follow in how we disclose on our financial statements.
Correct.
That's why I pointed out that 50-year delay.
It's and we have so many rules. Do we really want to make more work for ourselves if it's not a rule?
Well,
I don't know my agency, so.
In accounting, I thought the standard was, if it's good in practice, it's a good rule. I mean, that was sort of the concept I thought when I went through accounting.
Is there a concern that you feel that the auditor
I
needs to look
just
into?
brought it up
Okay.
for their staff's consideration in the future. I mean, I obviously have a...
Do you attend these GASB meetings where they decide on what pronouncements they're going to come out with? Because if you do, I want to prevent you from coming out with that one.
The what? The what?
I want to prevent you from coming out with that one.
Oh, yeah.
No pronouncement, please.
No, I just thought it was an interesting fight in the 70s.
Okay, so is there anything else in regards to the items 1 and 2 from and Davis Farr's overview of the audit process?
I don't have anything additional.
Okay, so the last one is for Chris to discuss the 2024 work plan calendar.
Thank you. Okay, and I'm going to go back to my original presentation, which is the one in blue here, and I go to page 4 in the presentation, because there's one thing that Shannon did. Construction in progress as a risk area, and this was something they looked at quite heavily last year, and they gave us some recommendations, and they gave us 4 recommendations in particular, and we want to summarize those recommendations and what we have done thus far since the last audit committee meeting. So the first recommendation was essentially staff training. Make sure that the staff that oversee capital assets accounting and expensing and capitalization making those decisions are trained. And I would like to say that we've made some progress certainly in that area. For example, myself, I served as an instructor over a capital assets accounting class with our auditors, Davis Farr, last December. It was a statewide CSMFO class on capital assets. We also had staff attend this 2024 CSMFO conference, which there's always a capital assets class that's included there. We had staff sitting and attending that. And then we acquired the latest and greatest GFOA books and guides concerning capital assets, and that's what we're reviewing to make sure that we're complying with those rules. So that was the first recommendation. And the second one was for the accounting staff to participate in the budget planning process. One of the things we've done is that I now sit as the chair of the GATE group, and this is an internal group that kind of essentially monitors all the projects. So when a project starts all the way through its end and the different phases it goes through, we just make sure that there's a representative from all the different departments in attendance. We talk about the projects and we sign off on them, like a certain gate is completed so it can move forward to the next gate until it's actually completed and put into service. And at those same meetings, we do talk about accounting and budgeting rules concerning, accounting rules concerning capital assets, what to capitalize, what not to, as well as impacts on budgets in terms of the costs. So that's something we've done. The third recommendation had to do with Water Authority-wide training. This was a great one, and we actually, either in May or June, we're working with our auditors to actually host a training session for Water Authority staff, Water Authority-wide. So we're going to have participants from our O&M department, our engineering department, our water resources, certainly our finance department. And we'll talk about the accounting rules. We'll talk about the capitalization versus expensing of costs rules, and then appropriateness for projects sitting in the CIP to begin with. So that'll happen in a couple more months. And then lastly, it was a recommendation that we update the Water Authority's capitalization policy, and that's something that is in process. It is a wholesale rewrite. We've really expanded pages in that, and we're due to have that completed and adopted internally by the end of the fiscal year in June. And so we just wanted to, again, give a brief follow-up on those recommendations. And okay, now the last slide that's in the slide deck just has to do with the work calendar. This is rather small information, so I won't really dive into it, but Shannon stole my thunder. In mid-April, the auditors will be coming out conducting the interim field work. And then in late August, they'll be coming back to conduct the year-end field work, and that's auditing of all of the balances. And then we're looking for the end of September to actually receive the opinion from Davis Farr. And so that would conclude the work of internal work of staff. But the committee has 2 more meetings, certainly. One will be in mid-September, and then the final one will be in late October. And that will be where Shannon comes in and gives a presentation on the audit, and we'll be going over the draft ACFR at that time, and certainly taking any questions from the committee members. And that concludes my formal comments, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
So I don't have any comments myself. Director Hirsch-McMillan, anything? Okay. I don't believe that we have any information. I adjourn the committee meeting at this time.